Welcome back. In this video we're going to take a look at JavaScript events. So let's start with our own folder inside the DOM section. So let's create a new folder which is number 4. I'm going to call this events, and then let's open this up inside of brackets. Then add a title, JavaScript events, and then we don't need the style tags for this one. We can also clear the HTML and also the script tags. And there we go. Okay, so JavaScript is heavily used in web pages to add interactivity. And we need a way for JavaScript to detect a user's actions in order to know how to react. So this is where events or event handling comes in. You can also think of an event as a trigger. As an example, the browser can wait for an event to happen, such as a user clicking on a button, which we've looked at in previous videos, where the button click has triggered a function. So we briefly looked at the onClick event handler to trigger a function. And JavaScript can also react to things such as when a page is finished loading, when keys are pressed on a keyboard, when a mouse hovers over an element, or even when you submit a form. Okay, so let's create a input to work with, and the input type of button, and then let's give this an ID of button, and then let's add some bootstrap classes, and we can change these using JavaScript events. So add a class, the bootstrap class of btn, and then btn success. Let's add a value to this button of hello, and then as we looked at previously, we can add the onClick event to trigger a function. So I'm going to set function name of change, and then down to the script tags we can create this function inside of there. So the function of change, and this should look pretty familiar now because we've used it a few times. So we want to do a document.getElement by ID, and we'll grab the ID of button, and then once this button is pressed, I just want this to trigger a new class name, and this can be equal to bootstrap classes again of btn danger. So we'll begin with the button success, and then once clicked this will change to button danger. So let's open this up and check this is working okay. So there's the button success, which is the green background, and then once clicked we get the class name of button or btn danger added, which is the red background. So that's the onClick event, and we can also do a similar kind of thing when we hover over the button with the mouse rather than clicking on it. And to do this we'll just change onClick to be on mouse over. So now when we hover over the button we should get the class change just like that. So that occurs once the mouse goes over the button. If we want it to occur when the cursor leaves the button, we can change on mouse over to on mouse out. And there's a subtle difference. So once we go over the button, the class doesn't change, but as soon as the mouse leaves the button, we're going to get the change to the red background. And all these events are going on behind the scenes on many web pages that you visit every day. Okay, so the next useful event I want to look at is on key up and on key down, and that's pretty much what it sounds like every time a button on the keyboard is pressed or every time it's released. This can trigger an event. So let's create a example form to see this in action. So let's just comment out the input, and let's create a form. So then the input type of text, a ID to grab a JavaScript of input field, And then just like we've used with the on-click events, we can change this to on-key-up. And this can trigger a function too, so we'll call the function keyPressed. So with this example, I'm going to create a simple function which is going to be triggered every time a keyboard button is pressed. So I'm going to create a empty level 2 heading, and I want the function to display the text. So every time a button is pressed inside this form, I want the level 2 heading to contain the value of what is entered inside the input. So leave the contents empty for now, and let's add an ID of display. So then let's create our function of keyPressed. So first of all, we want to grab the display with a document.getElementById, which is the display ID, and then we want to set the inner HTML of the display to be equal to the value of this input field. So we need input field dot value. So we're grabbing the empty level 2 heading, and then we're setting the contents of the inner HTML to be equal to whatever the user has typed inside this input field. And this is going to be triggered every time a keyboard button is pressed. So let's take a look at this in action. So there's the form in the top corner. So every time you press a key, this triggers a function, and then we'll get the contents populated inside the level 2 heading. So this function is triggered every time a key is released with on-key-up. We can also have on-key-down, and this is triggered as soon as the button is pressed down. So them two events are fairly similar, just with a small subtle difference. And then next I want to look at the onChange event. And this is triggered when a change is detected. So we can use the same form, but this time instead of on-key-down, we want to change this to onChange. And then let's create a function. So every time there is a change detected, I want to increase the font. So let's create this function down at the bottom. So when a change is detected, we want to grab the input field, which is this section, and then let's set the CSS to be a little bit bigger. So document.getElementById. So again, let's grab the input field, and then .style, .font size, and then so we can set it to working. Let's set the font size to be a lot bigger, so 50 pixels, and then let's save that. And actually this wants to be font size, so save that and then head over to the browser. Okay, so let's type something inside there, and as soon as we either click off it or press the return key, and this should trigger the function. So there we go. So now we've got the text changed to 50 pixels. Okay, so that's how the onChange event handler works. And the last event handler I'm going to show you in this video is using onSubmit, which is triggered when a form is submitted. So let's create an example form, or we can use the one from just before. So for this to work, we need to put it inside the form element. So onSubmit, and then again we need to put a function to run. So run validation. And then we can add a script inside this function to do some form validation when this is submitted. Okay, so for this to work, we need to create a input, which is the type of submit. And we'll give it a value of submit form. So save that, and then go down to the script, and then create the function, which is run validation. So you can put any form validation that you want in here. So just to check it's working, I'm going to create a alert and just create some text. just of form validation, and then refresh the browser. So now when we submit the form, this triggers the onSubmit function, and there's our text that we put in before of form validation. And that's really useful for doing some checks inside the browser to check that the user has filled in all the fields or typed things out correctly. So that's the end of this video on JavaScript events, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll take a look at a mini challenge which involves reacting to on-click events to make a name animator. I'll see you there.